Welcome to Finding Family DNA, the show about finding and connecting birth families, with your host, Jay Rosenzweig, founder and CEO of BirthParentFinder.com. And now, here's Jay.
Hi, everyone. This is Jay Rosenzweig, founder and CEO of BirthParentFinder.com, and welcome to another episode of Finding Family DNA. And by popular demand, we're bringing back Misty. Again, she's on here every time we do a show. She's going to talk about some of the other cases she works on besides finding people's birth relatives. And Misty, besides finding relatives, what else do you do?
I am an investigative genetic genealogy, which means I use the same technique for biological families, but on unidentified victims like John Does and Jane Does, or offenders like people who commit sexual assault and homicide.
And that's interesting. It's totally different from what we do. But before we get started with that, I want our audience to know that it's so important to subscribe to our YouTube show, because we do fund our pro bono cases with the income we receive from the advertising dollars from the show. And if you scroll through our YouTube page, make sure you subscribe. And we see in the comments that people are saying, hey, we scrolled through your YouTube page and now we're subscribing, and they don't regret it. They love our show, Misty. And I know that we've got over 3,000 subscribers, and we continue to grow. And I also want to tell our audience that beginning of March, I will be at RootsTech in Salt Lake City, and I will be representing the media, and the keynote speaker is Marlee Matlin, the actress who won an Oscar for Children of a Lesser God and a bunch of other things she's done. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait. It's overwhelming. Misty's been there before, but you're not going to be there this year. But I wish you were, Misty, because we love having you there. And again, if you have questions about anything, go to our YouTube page, and we do respond to the comments. I know that we got a comment, I think it was the other day. Misty responded right away and just helped someone resolve an issue, whatever it was, but we do respond to the comments. So on that note, we're going to talk today about the Danielle Clause murder case from 1991 out of Ventura, California. And I know our audience really wanted us to talk about this case. We can talk about it, or you can talk about it, because it's basically a closed case. It's not like one of your other open ones that's pending trial or whatever. This is a closed case, and you can talk about it freely. It's been in the news. There was an episode of Bloodline Detectives, and you show a few clips from that. And this is the first time that Misty is going to be doing a demonstration on how she solved a case and sharing her screen with everybody. So this is very exciting. So on that note, Misty, the Danielle Clause murder case, 1991, take it away.
So we're going to talk today about investigative genetic genealogy and how it differs from traditional genetic genealogy. So Jay, with you, I perform genetic genealogy, and that's analyzing DNA results to help identify biological family members. The term investigative genetic genealogy is reserved for using that same technique, but to identify violent offenders and to identify John Does or Jane Does, which are unidentified bodies, and to be able to restore their identity and reunite them with family. So we're going to talk a little bit about the process first and how this first started. You all may be familiar with the term the Golden State Killer. The Golden State Killer was a moniker given to a man who was responsible for over 50 rapes, 13 murders, and countless home invasions in the 70s and 80s. The case was cold for decades. People were living in fear. They were not able to identify who was responsible for all this violence until investigative genetic genealogy was used in 2018. Now, how this works is there's samples preserved from the crime scene in this case. So it may be semen samples, it may be DNA that was left from a drinking cup, for example, of what we call the unknown subject. So the person responsible for committing these crimes that is unknown to law enforcement. These samples are sequenced for SNP testing, which reveals hundreds of thousands of markers instead of the traditional 20 that CODIS uses. That SNP profile is uploaded to two websites that we can use for law enforcement, GEDMatch and Family Tree DNA. We're going to talk a little bit about the two databases, and I'm going to start with GEDMatch. Now, GEDMatch is an upload only. It's not a DNA test. So if you've taken a DNA test at Ancestry.com, MyHeritage, 23andMe, and you want to be able to assist law enforcement in these cases, for free, you can download your SNP file, your DNA file from the site you tested at, and you can upload it into GEDMatch. And if anybody wants to do that and starts having issues with it, feel free to drop a comment on this video, and I will help you get your DNA uploaded into one of these websites. Now, GEDMatch is really a hobbyist platform. Lots of people upload their DNA there. So they have a opt-in or opt-out option for law enforcement access. So once you go to upload your sample, you can opt in so law enforcement can see your kit and potentially utilize you in an investigation. And if you're not comfortable with that, you can opt out and just use it for the hobbyist purposes that it has. The second database is Family Tree DNA. Now, Family Tree DNA differs because they also allow you to do a direct swab. They have something called a buccal swab, which is a cheek swab. And so you can, they host their own database, so you can test at that website and your results will be in their database. Or you could upload from another company like Ancestry or 23andMe, your file into the Family Tree DNA database, and it gives you a list of direct family matches. They also allow law enforcement access with consent. So if you do want to help, you have to make sure you are opted into law enforcement matching. I'm going to show you a little bit about what GEDMatch looks like just so you can get an idea of it. So this is my own DNA uploaded into GEDMatch. So we upload the sample from the unknown crime scene and a match list is generated of relatives. They could be close, they could be far of the unknown subject. The investigative genetic genealogist then builds the family trees of those DNA matches looking for common ancestors. Once we locate those common ancestors, we build that tree closer back in time to identify who our unknown subject is. So in GEDMatch, you'll see on the far left, you have name. That's the person's name that has uploaded their sample. I've blocked that out, obviously, for privacy reasons. The second column is email. So you'll have an email address associated with your kit. And you can actually use this email if you're a hobbyist genealogist who wants to know more about your own genetic genealogy to reach out to these people and see how you two are related. Then the most important column we have is the total CM. CM is a unit of measurement, Centimorgans, and it tells how much DNA is shared between two people. The higher that number is, the closer related they likely are. The lower the number is, the more distantly related. So in this case, you'll see the top one is 3,575 Centimorgans. That's actually me. I uploaded my sample twice to illustrate this. So if you have a twin, or if you come across yourself, you're looking at about 3,500 Centimorgans. Now, the second one is 3,572 Centimorgans. That is actually my dad. I manage his kit. So a parent-child relationship or a self-relationship is typically about 3,500 Centimorgans, and that's the top that you will see in GEDMatch. Below that is my mother. So again, we have that 3,000 Centimorgans. And then you see it starts to drop off. Below that is my grandmother. So me and my grandmother share 1,775 Centimorgans. So it's half the amount of DNA shared between me and my father and me and my mother. And then finally, you'll see another match that comes in at 169 Centimorgans. That is a second cousin of mine. So you can use this information to establish what the probable relationships are. And when we upload a law enforcement case, this is what we see as well. Matches to the unknown subject and the total amount of shared DNA between the unknown subject and that person. Now, after this is done and the tree is built and you come to somebody that you think could be the unknown subject, you generate that lead to the law enforcement agency. You can't just arrest somebody for being found in a genealogy database, though. The agency needs to investigate that lead through traditional forensic and investigative methods to rule in or out the possibility. Did this person live in the area of the crime? Are they the right age to have been committing this crime? Do they have a prior criminal record? What do their personal habits say? Did they have a personal relationship with the victim? Things like that. The agency will then collect a DNA sample from the person of interest for that CODIS comparison. So we have SNP testing for genetic genealogy, and we have STR testing for CODIS. That's that 20 markers. It's a yes or no answer, and we'll tell the agency if that person is a match to the crime scene evidence. If there is a match, the case is closed. So that's a very quick rundown of the process, but I'm going to talk about a specific case that I worked, the case of Danielle Clause, and how we use this method to solve it.
And Misty?
Yeah.
So this was the case that you gave the demonstration on last September when we spoke at the WAD conference in Chicago, and you got a standing ovation. So I just wanted our audience to know that.
Yeah, it's a great case, and I'm very happy to share it with the audience.
So go right ahead.
So Danielle Lynn Clause was found on the 16th of July, 1991 in Ventura, California. She had been a victim of homicide. There was blunt force trauma injuries to her face. She had also been sexually assaulted. Now, she was 42 years old. She was a mother. She was a wife. But unfortunately, she had drug addiction issues, and she was known to engage in sex work to procure those drugs. So this put her on a high-risk lifestyle. So we're going to talk about the investigation into her murder. I'm going to start by showing a clip from Bloodline detectives that's going to give some background on the case and how the case was brought to investigators' attention and what initial evidence was viewed. We have some evidence in this case. We know the eyewitness had seen a white truck, pickup truck, which we have a little sketch of in the left-hand corner. We know that she was found in a flood control catch basin located off Tioga Drive. She was found partially unclothed, multiple blunt force trauma injuries, and was sexually assaulted. And we also know that there was a rock found that had blood evidence on that rock that believed was to be associated with the crime. She was last seen the 15th of July, the night before, 1991, talking to a man driving that small white pickup truck. Next, we're going to talk about the genealogy and how the investigative genetic genealogy helped narrow down this investigation. So we had input the sample into the GEDMatch and Family Tree DNA databases, and we had come up back with our top match, what we call the top match, the highest match in the database that shares the most amount of DNA with the unknown subject. In this case, the top match was 259 Centimorgans. So we have a calculator that we use called Shared DNA Project, and you can enter in the amount of shared DNA, the amount of Centimorgans between two people, and it will give you an estimate of relationships. Now, what you can do is you can limit those relationships. Like if you see on this screen, it spits out a whole bunch. We have half great aunt, we have second cousin, we have first cousin once removed. So you can judge by the age of the tester, who we knew was approximately the same age as what the unknown subject would be, that it would likely be a second cousin. So we could rule out the majority of the relationships. We knew we were looking at a second cousin of the unknown subject or a half second cousin of the unknown subject. So what we did is we started building out this match's family tree. So I started with her father and her mother, then her grandparents, then her great-grandparents. That's the second cousin level. Then we had a second match, and that second match was 200 Centimorgans. And so we plugged that into our calculator and found it was around the same relationship, about a second cousin. And we built out her family tree. And in doing so, we realized that her great-grandparents are the same great-grandparents from match number 1. This is what we call a common set of ancestors. So we know both match number 1 and match number 2 are descended from the same couple. And so we know that our unknown subject must be descended from that same couple as well. So I started descendancy research, and that's when you bring the tree forward in time. So we started at those great-grandparents that we had identified, and we built out their children. I built out their grandchildren, and I built out their great-grandchildren to bring it down to that second level. So we had this tree full of people that are all descended from this one couple that match number 1 and match number 2 are also descended from. So we knew the unknown subject had to be somewhere in the tree. We then moved on to something called kinship testing. Kinship testing is when you take a known person in the tree, so you know they're related to that same couple of ancestors, and you know they're related to match number 1 and match number 2, but you're not exactly sure how they're related to the unknown subject. Are they a second cousin? Are they a first cousin? Are they a sibling? So we had found this woman online who had been researching this family, and she was descended from this family. And so the agency had reached out to her and asked if she'd be willing to submit her DNA to see how closely or farther related we are to the unknown subject. So we selected her. She was one of the great-grandchildren of our most recent common ancestor of that set of great-grandparents. Now I'm going to play a little clip that's going to talk about the what the agency did to retrieve that sample and a little history on that kinship. So we got the results back from this kinship tester, and it came back at a whopping 1,033 centimorgans, which means she is a first cousin to the unknown subject. So we were able to narrow that branch down from great-grandparents down to grandparents. We knew our unknown subject had to be within that first cousin section. So when interviewing her, we found out she only had 2 male first cousins. And they were siblings to each other. Now, what was interesting on this is one brother had brown hair and green eyes. The other brother had blonde hair and blue eyes. So what we turned to was something called phenotyping. The agency didn't want to go and interview the living brother. The male with brown hair was deceased. They didn't want to interview the living brother because if it was him, it could blow the investigation completely out of the water. So they had to think of a way to rule him out or rule him in without directly speaking to him. So that's when we turned to phenotyping. Now, phenotyping is a certain way that you can process DNA. We take the same SNP file from the crime scene sample, but we can predict things like eye color, hair color, face shape, biogeographical ancestry, and freckling. So we took the unknown subject sample and we did a phenotyping prediction. So we predicted what these monikers would look like, what color eye this person would have, what color hair this person would have. And when the results came back, we knew that brother A had blonde hair and blue eyes, and brother B had brown hair and hazel eyes. He was a deceased brother. It came back that the subject likely has brown hair and hazel eyes. So knowing this information, the agency felt comfortable in going to the living brother and speaking with him. And when they did, he was a wealth of information. Him and his sister shared plenty of information about the deceased brother, and they identified him as Larry Devon Welch. And I'm going to play a little clip that's going to talk a little bit about their investigation into Larry and what was uncovered. Through the entire process, from beginning to end, from that little sample from a crime scene, we were able to identify the murderer of Danielle Clause as Larry Devon Welch, who passed away in 1999. And so this methodology is used in crimes all over the nation, not only for offender cases, but for unidentified bodies as well. And so I thought I would give a little breakdown of how exactly it works and how your DNA can help solve these cases.
Misty, I love this presentation. This is the second time you've done this, and I'm so glad that you're doing this for our audience on our YouTube show. At this time, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk to Misty more about this case and get her feedback. So we'll be right back with Finding Family DNA. This is Jay Rosenzweig, the founder and CEO of BirthParentFinder.com. Sometimes the missing piece of your life is a person you've never met. For over 2 decades, our team of expert investigators and genealogists at BirthParentFinder.com has relied on the power of DNA and genetic genealogy to reconnect thousands of families separated by time, distance, and circumstance. Visit BirthParentFinder.com and begin your journey today. Your family isn't lost, it's waiting to be found. We're back with our genealogist extraordinaire, Misty Gillis, who talked about the Danielle Clause murder case in 1991. And this was big news. This was on Bloodline Detectives. You were on that show, and I believe Nancy Grace is the host.
Yep.
And that, how many years ago was that, Misty?
Oh gosh, a handful of years is all I can say. I don't remember the exact timeline. I think I filmed for Bloodline Detectives about 1.5 years after it was completed, so maybe 4 years.
Wow. And again, I want to thank you for being here because I know you've been under the weather the last couple of weeks. And
thank you.
We had this planned a while ago, and we didn't want to postpone this because we know everyone wanted to watch this. And I know it's a struggle, but you're doing beautifully. And this case, the company you worked for at the time, was it a law enforcement referral?
Yeah, so the company I had worked for at the time performed investigative genetic genealogy on law enforcement cases. That's what they did. That was their business operation. And so we had the Ventura County Sheriff's Office enlist our help essentially with this case.
And I know when you get this information, the law enforcement agencies do not want you to personally reach out to anyone.
No, of course not.
And then, but there have been cases where they had you do that, but I don't think it was this case, right?
No. Sometimes we do the outreach on John Doe and Jane Doe cases where they're unidentified remains, where there's no risk at interfering with the investigation.
Right, because since this is a law enforcement case and an ongoing investigation at the time, they don't want, since you're not an expert at interviewing people for law enforcement, they want to do that themselves, correct?
Correct. And you don't want to tip off the person that they're being investigated.
Exactly. Let's go back to GEDMatch. How much of a factor was GEDMatch in solving this case?
100% was the factor. That's what we use. That's day to day. GEDMatch is our first go-to when we do these cold cases and these, unidentified human remains. That is what we use. So if you really do want to contribute to helping solve law enforcement cases, I would love to be there to help support uploading you to GEDMatch.
And I know that company has a pretty big size booth at RootsTech, and they help people upload their DNA to their database.
Yep. I actually worked at their booth last year. Yep.
And it really does help solve cases, doesn't it?
It really does. It's phenomenal.
And so this particular case, you said it was a few years ago. I know you worked the boy in the box, and there's other cases that are still pending that eventually you'll be able to talk about, and we can't wait for that. But, and I've asked you this before, where does this case rank as far as your most warm feelings, successful accomplishments in this work you've done?
Honestly, it's hard for me to say. Like, I don't really put them in a ranking system in my head. They all mean something different to me for very different reasons, And in Danielle's case, like, she was a wife and a mother, and having her life taken from her in such a horrific way is just it's rewarding to be able to say, it's okay, Danielle, this is the person that did this to you. And, unfortunately, he was deceased, so he didn't face prosecution for his crimes. But I think having that information out there brings a little bit of resolution to the family.
So when they did the press conference on this case, were you around or not?
No.
Unlike the boy in the box case.
That's right. Yes.
Right. And I know Ventura County is the next county over from where I live. It's probably a 40-minute drive to where this crime occurred from where I live. So it's it's kind of in my backyard. I didn't know much about this back then, since it really is a different county, and I don't know how much press it got back then. I don't know if you know.
I don't know either. I mean, I was 2, so I don't know, but
but this particular case, like you said, it goes back to 1991. And what year was it solved?
Would have been probably around 2022, maybe.
That is a long time to solve a case, and let's go back to the DNA. So they use a lab to extract the DNA from the deceased, correct?
For an unidentified human remains case, yes.
Well, no, she was identified, right?
Yes. So the DNA they had from her was from an unknown male from a sexual assault.
Right, and they used, was it sperm they used?
I believe so. I believe it was a semen sample.
It's interesting because they must have just stored it in a database, and years later, when this technology was developed, they utilized it, obviously.
Well, that's one thing that you have to give credit to the agencies for is, the forethinking to preserve this evidence, to preserve it correctly for the one day that what if we can do something with it. 100% hands down credit to Ventura County for having the forethought to do that.
Right. And so have you worked any other cases where you had to upload from a semen sample that you were given, or?
Yeah, tons.
When you say tons, how many?
Well, I mean, altogether, like I've generated leads in over 46 cases. And I mean, a huge chunk of those were sexual assaults, homicides that we had semen samples from. So
I don't want to put you on the spot, but off the top of your head, in this particular area, how many cases have you solved?
In this, like for sexual assaults?
Correct.
I would say probably between 15 and 20, possibly.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And in most of these cases, is the perp deceased?
Not most of them, no, actually. I just had one recently that broke in Florida of a man named Larry Franklin Tucker who entered a elderly woman's house and sexually assaulted her for hours on end and then fled. And I was just able to identify him, and they just had a press conference about it a couple of weeks ago.
Hence, you can mention it.
Yeah.
And that was in Florida. What part?
I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. Tavares?
I don't know.
Lake County, I believe. Lake County.
Okay, and this is all over the news, basically?
It's if you Google the case, it's on the news. They, the agency sent us a link when they went public with it.
Yeah, you didn't mention that one to me, I don't think. Unless I forgot.
Maybe I didn't.
I know we work a lot of cases. We work a lot of different cases. And by the way, we've had cases where our clients, we found out that their birth was a circumstance of a sexual assault.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
And it's very traumatic. And I got a couple cases right now where in the state that they lived in, the perp, or the birth father in that case, is still alive. So technically they could be prosecuted in that particular state.
Oh, is there no statute of limitations?
The statute of limitations, right. It doesn't really, it's like 30 years or something, or some they don't expire at all. But the traumatic effect is one thing on the client. And they don't want to bother. And also, I don't want to make light of this, but you hear different stories. You've heard this before. You hear different stories from the birth mother. Was she really sexual assaulted, or is she just saying that so her daughter won't pursue this any further? And we found cases where they were sexual assaulted, and we found cases where they weren't sexually assaulted. And I felt bad for the birth father in that case because they just didn't want that guy to know that he was the birth father. It was a one-night stand or whatever, and it was not, the birth mother was not a victim of a crime. And I always give birth mothers benefits of the doubt, but you just don't know what their mindset is and what they want to tell their child about how they came about, right?
Right.
And I know you've had cases like that, which again is so different from this, but in the end, we solved this case. And in this particular case, were there any family members still alive?
I believe she has a sister that's still alive, and I believe her husband at the time is still alive.
Were they interviewed by the media?
They were on Bloodline detectives, yeah.
And I'm sure it was closure for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this Danielle Clause, was she? What kind of person was she that you knew?
I don't really know much about her. Her family is pretty private about her. And I hate that I have to lead with that she had a drug addiction and, engaged in sex work, because nobody, that's not who a person is. That doesn't tell you who a person is. What the decisions we make in life and things that do we can be victims of circumstance. And so I would love for her to just be remembered as, from what I was told, a loving wife and a loving mother.
And you know what? If that's what her obituary says, that's all it needs to say, right?
Yep.
Exactly. And honestly, moving forward from this, our audience loves these stories. Is there one coming up that you can do, that you can talk about, that's not currently in the courts?
I will have to go through my case files, but I could probably find something.
Yeah, this one, I wanted to do this one because you did it for the World Association of Detectives at their 100th anniversary conference in Chicago in September. And we were the keynote, and I did my presentation on how to find birth parents using DNA, and then you did your presentation on unknown remains. And I wish people would have us come to their conference more often and do this kind of presentation. So anyone out
Presenting
there,
myself is fun.
Right. If you have a conference coming up, whether it's genealogy, whether it's a police conference, Misty and I, or just Misty, would love to come and talk to your group. Anything else you want to share with our audience, Misty?
No, just, thank you guys all for being here. And again, if any of you, want to make the leap into GEDMatch and you're having technical difficulties, feel free to drop a comment and I will respond back as soon as I can and try to get you on your way.
Right. And on that note, again, make sure you subscribe to this page and comment, and we will answer your comments. And everyone, be well, and we'll see you next time on Finding Family DNA.